This is a Media Lab podcast.
Hey, Kyle. Hey,
What?
do you know where I can park this thing?
What did you come on?
It's this thing. What do you guys call it out here? It's like a little machine. It's got a chair. I think you cut grass with it.
Oh, yeah, a little machine that cuts grass. Yeah, that's what we call it out here in the West. Anyway, shut up about your thing. No one cares. We are, and actually more appropriately, I cracked the first rune message.
What's a rune again?
You know this like deep quality fiction that we've been building for the last 6 weeks? Well, I've cracked this message that's been written and scrawled upon my walls. At least the first line I've unearthed. It says, "When it comes time, go through."
That's a terrible pickup line.
In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
And my name is David.
And I'm the machine.
This is a podcast where a sentient machine forces us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. Although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. Today, we're going to be watching the film The Straight Story.
This morning you fall and you can't get off the floor. That's your hips, Alvin. And you're going to have to use a walker now to get around.
No walker. I love a lightning storm.
Me too, Dad. Uncle Al, I had a stroke.
Rose, darling, I'm going to go back on the road. And I've got to make this trip on my own. I've got to go see Lyle. I know you understand.
Fun fact, actually. So we had this push mower, like this little orange little push mower, and I actually preferred it because I thought it cut the grass better than the riding lawnmower on my farm. So I really enjoyed the exercise of pushing this thing around like half an acre of grass in the summertime. One day, I had just filled it up with gas and accidentally spilled some on the top of it. And I was like, whatever, it'll be fine. It'll evaporate by the time I start this thing. Third pull, catches on fire. The whole thing is just on fire on the top of this like push mower, and I ran away. Just like bolted, like, I don't know what to do. This thing is going to explode. And so then I had to come back and I like beat it out to like put out the flames, and never told my parents that I set the lawnmower on fire.
Well, considering they're the only ones that listen to this podcast, they do know now. Also, right. This is the great material you'll get. If you become a Patreon supporter, you can get access to all of Kyle's anecdotes about growing up on a farm.
On a farm. Who knows if this is even going to be in the episode, but we'll see. Dave, before we jump into our like relationship with this film, David Lynch in general, I do want to double back on something. We actually received a message, an email message to our email account, which you can do as well. kyleanddavevsthemachine@gmail.com is where you can send feedback to. And this is from, I'm going to say it's Jessica. I think it's Jessica. I forgot to write it down. But Jessica writes, "I couldn't help but notice that at the end of your 5 weeks of talking about the 1999 Best Picture nominees, that neither you or Dave had the conversation about who you would have picked to win." And there's some other stuff here too, but that is basically the thrust of it. And I was going to ask that question to Dave, but forgot to ask it about him when we were in our American Beauty episode.
How is it possible for you to be so bad at your job?
So let's double back now. And you don't know this, Dave, but me and the machine will sometimes talk mostly about you when you're not here, but also about other topics and things.
Not surprised.
And I think there'll be some time at the end of this first season to discuss, in general, if we were the Academy, if David Yun and Kyle Marshall were the Academy, who would we give awards to? We'll have a more fuller conversation about that. But let's just say that we were members of the Academy, got our ballots in the mail, and the 5 Best Picture nominees they said that year were The Sixth Sense, The Cider House Rules, The Insider, the other one, what am I forgetting? American Beauty. Oh, and The Green Mile.
Right.
And The Green Mile. So those are the 5. Who would you, David Young, nominate, or not nominate, who would you pick for Best Picture out of those 5?
Am I like, is it me as myself or me as a douchebag critic?
No.
Actually,
as
on the
you,
Academy?
you've somehow been plucked out of the ether and said you are now a part of the Academy, which I'm going to call my shot. I would love to be someday. I just want to be a member of the Academy so I can vote on things. They just opened it up. They accepted like 800 new members last year alone or something like that. They've been really packing in the amount of people into it. So let me be part of the Academy.
Judging by the previous election, probably only 40% of them actually cast a ballot.
Interesting thing what they do, and this is why, in my opinion, the last few years have been a little wild as far as who wins Best Picture, because it's the only category that does it this way. You actually rank your choices. And so you have to get 50% of the vote. So they do it once, and if you don't have 50% of the vote, they cut off the lowest percentage one and then redo it again. Anyways, we're not doing that. Who would you pick number 1 Best Picture of those 5 nominees? I know what mine is.
Sixth Sense.
Oh, okay. That's what I would have picked too.
Yeah.
I would love.
I cut you off.
Yeah,
there.
sorry. I would also pick The Sixth Sense. Of those 5, at least, I think it is 100% the best movie. And 20 years later, I think is the one that holds up the best.
Yes.
There's been some people throw it out here. I don't know if you would enjoy this, of setting a certain time frame, whether it's like 20, 25 years, 30 years, and having the current Academy revote on those awards from X amount of years ago and see if the same movie actually won. I would actually like to see that and to see where it falls. You're
such a nerd.
I am a nerd. I personally wish that Price Waterhouse would release it after like a decade or something like that, of how close certain years actually were. Because I think that
they don't tell you the votes.
They don't. And I hate it because I would love to know some years, like, how close was another movie to win over Green Book? Who was the second pick that year of who could have possibly won? Or, the year between Shakespeare in Love and Saving Private Ryan. Like, how close was Saving Private Ryan to actually have won that year? Was it like a blowout, or was it like 5 votes is all that it took?
It was probably very close, yeah. It was probably one vote.
Probably. Spielberg decided not to vote that year, and like that's the one year.
Spielberg seems like the type of guy who wouldn't vote for himself.
I agree with that. He probably was like, I'm gonna vote for this plucky upstart. I don't even know who directed that movie, honestly.
Hanks.
No idea who even directed that movie.
I feel like Tom Hanks would do the same thing. He's just like, you know what, guys?
Enough's enough.
You did a great job. Yeah, you did a great job.
All right, this segment brought to you by Kyle's undying love of numbers and Academy statistics. Dave, let's get into this movie, I guess a little bit more broadly. So what is your relationship with The Straight Story and David Lynch in general?
So I have no relationship with this movie. I've never heard of it. Nothing. It doesn't register at all.
What's your relationship with lawnmowers then?
Well,
you wrote in on one.
We had an electric. Yeah, we had an electric one. I mowed a lot of lawn.
How much lawn did you have in Toronto?
Tiny, but it's a lot because I don't want to do it. And our neighbor had the old school mechanical one when you push the blades would roll.
I am so turned on right now.
And yeah, I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, those are cool. My uncle, his sister, was mowing the lawn with those old mechanical ones back in 1950-something, 60-something, and cut off his 2 fingers. So even to this day, he only has half his fingers on his middle and ring finger on his right hand.
I mean, they are pretty much exposed sickles flipping around in a circle. But I grew up in North York in the second house, but the first semi, and I had a lot of, that was like when neighborhoods had friends who hung out. And my friend's little brother got his foot caught in the electric mower when he was like 2.
That's not good.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, that was a bad one. Yeah. I didn't fall. I was like 5 or 4. So I didn't, it's not like I went and found out if he was okay after, and we moved shortly. No, I don't remember actually how old I was. But
so it's pretty convenient here that there's an accident that befell this young neighbor, and then you suddenly left town like a week after that. Seems a little suspicious to me.
I was never questioned. and we're past the statute.
And you can't prove anything. So
I owe no answers. Yeah. David Lynch has a great pompadour.
Yes.
I don't know if it's technically a pompadour. It's like his own look.
He's got a very
I
distinct
think we
look.
briefly chatted about it. My relation with David Lynch is probably Dune.
Mm-hmm.
And
which you have a love affair of Dune that is much more deep than I think a lot of people.
Yeah, I love Dune. I think I first watched Dune probably on TV, and I just thought it was pretty cool and weird. I didn't appreciate how bad the ending is, but I just thought it was weird because it was giant worms and blue-eyed people, not in the Aryan way, but literally glowing. And they shoot things with their mouths. It's a fucking weird movie. But I do remember, I think it's Lost Highway, whichever movie did that the score was Trent Reznor, and I bought that CD, and that was a weird movie.
I'm pretty sure that is Lost Highway.
Yeah. And that's a great, those are great tunes. Pre-emo, but pretty hardcore. But, movie-ish. I'd like that. And also, I don't think I've watched anything else. I missed Twin Peaks. Mm-hmm. I don't remember if I've watched Mulholland Drive, but I just know he's weird. He's just a weirdo. And he makes weird movies. Yeah.
I'll answer these questions in the reverse order. So let me start with David Lynch. As with many things, my first introduction to David Lynch was actually via The Simpsons and them doing parodies of some of his things, like especially Twin Peaks, which was parodied a few times on that show before I even knew what Twin Peaks was.
How do I tell people I'm shaking my head in audio if they're not watching the YouTube? Anyways, all right, continue.
So that's like having people speak backwards and that sort of thing. Anyways, Twin Peaks parodies is like the first, I think, introduction to David Lynch. The first film that I saw of his was Mulholland Drive, which would have been, I think, the one that came after The Straight Story, if I'm not mistaken. As a pretentious university student, I tried to convince myself that it was brilliant and that it was like one of my favorite films. In the intervening years, I've had to reveal myself more truthfully and be like, I have no fucking idea what goes on in that movie. I've seen it, I'm not even joking, like 4 or 5 times, and I still could not describe to you what happens in that movie. And I think that has actually soured me a lot on David Lynch, and I have a little bit of a prejudice against him because there's that movie, and I started watching Twin Peaks when it was still on Canadian Netflix, which I don't think it actually still is on there anymore. And I lasted, I think, halfway through the first season, and I had to be like, you know what? I'm not actually enjoying this experience. I think it's too weird. It's too off-putting. That being said, I think that there's something about that. I do actually enjoy the concept of David Lynch more than I actually enjoy the experience of watching a David Lynch movie. I like that there's someone in Hollywood that's like, I don't care about your things that you like to do. I'm just going to do my own thing and be very truthful to that. So, like, I respect him as an artistic force, but I can't really...
He's a human.
Yeah, I just can't say that I've actually ever really enjoyed... Like, there's not a deep love of David Lynch that I find some other people have. Like, when the new Twin Peaks came out, Twin Peaks The Return, a couple of years ago, like, it was hailed as one of the best, quote unquote, movies of like the last decade, even though it was a miniseries. And I hate it when people say that miniseries are movies, but it felt like a theatrical experience and it was structured like a long movie and blah, 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 blah. I don't care. I never watched it because I just had such a negative reaction to the first season of Twin Peaks, but it is some people's jam. Great. I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. It's just not my thing. And so I haven't seen a lot more outside of Mulholland Drive and some of Twin Peaks. So this will be my first like foray into it, other than I could actually watch interviews with David Lynch almost all day long. I think he's a fascinating person just to listen to and speak about.
I just think he's neat.
This film, as you might suspect, as I am an Oscar devotee, knew it from the nominations it got in 1999, because Richard Farnsworth was nominated for Best Actor that year. I think David Lynch was nominated for Best Screenwriter, something like that. He was nominated for something.
Yeah, I think so.
So there's a couple nominations that it got. Having re-looked at this, I think it's actually the most bizarre thing that this is actually a Disney film. I think that's the oddest thing about this entire endeavor is that, wait, David Lynch did a Disney film of all things?
But it's not, is it considered, does Disney acknowledge it?
We'll get to that. We'll get to that here in a moment on this episode about the weird rights issues that actually this movie has. But let's do this. Let me go and thank some sponsors. And then when we return, we'll be talking about The Straight Story.
Hey there, everyone. Just Kyle breaking into the episode one more time to tell you about all of the great people who keep this show going. At least where I am here in Calgary, Alberta, it has been unseasonably warm. So it feels like I should be breaking out the lawnmower here at any moment. I hope anybody who is listening and their families are safe here right now. I realize that depending on where you are, the holidays are going to be looking a lot different. So we really do appreciate you spending like an hour plus of your time listening to us blather on about films from 21 years ago. It also allows me to do my little joke of The Straight Story. You mean the Tom Cruise biopic? Maybe that will also be released along with the 25 Star Wars films that Disney just talked about yesterday. Regardless, I want you to know that Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is brought to you by the Calgary Foundation. Whether it's funding anti-racism programs, addiction recovery, or food hampers for the hungry, for 65 years, the Calgary Foundation has proudly supported the charitable community to address some of Calgary's biggest challenges. Now, during this period of unprecedented urgent needs, Calgary Foundation renewed its commitment to build a healthy, vibrant, giving, caring, and resilient community. If you're a registered charity looking for a grant, a professional advisor creating a giving plan for your client, or a donor wanting to give back to community, discover a wealth of resources at calgaryfoundation.org and learn more about their work through Calgary Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is also brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from. If you switch retailers, nothing changes about the delivery of electricity or natural gas to your home or business. If you have an existing contract, you're going to want to find out the terms for leaving. If you don't, then it's even easier to sign up for Park Power. The choice is yours, and there's a better deal available to you. Learn more at parkpower.ca.
Well, Dave, was the journey worth it?
Sorry, I'm just waking up.
You were deep in slumber. This was like the best sleeping aid. I had to poke you with my poking stick a few times.
It was fine. Yeah, it was not at all what I thought it might be.
Okay.
You know, when you first said, before I knew it was a David Lynch film, there was a movie called The Straight Story. I thought it was going to be something on the LGBTQ, etc. front. And then as it started and I realized it's about an old man on a lawnmower.
Whose last name is Straight. That's why it's called The Straight Story. Yeah.
I wasn't really sure what was going on. And then because it was David Lynch and his reputation, I was expecting this to go off the wheels really quickly, and it didn't.
Well, I mean, something I was going to mention before the break and forgot. Like, outside of the very basic plot description of this movie, I actually didn't know what this was about. It's like, other than him being on the lawnmower going to visit his brother, I didn't actually know anything else about this movie. So, yeah, jumping into it and actually uncovering what the story beats are, and me being like, oh, Sissy Spacek's in this. I had no idea she was in this. and other actors that actually pop up every so often. I'm like, oh, this guy's in it. Interesting.
Quick note, apparently, as I discovered, her name is actually pronounced Spacek.
Oh, so
Spacek.
She's like Polish or something like that?
Yeah, it's a Polish background, I think. But
no one says it that way, right?
Yeah, so we're all wrong.
We're all wrong.
We're all wrong.
I've been saying that since day one.
To, I guess, go a little bit deeper, like non-spoilery section here. Like, what were your thoughts on the movie as a whole then?
As I was watching it, I just thought repeatedly, this is Kyle's jam. This is something that Kyle's going to really vibe with, because this is a farm.
Yes.
And it's about farm life. Even when they go into a town, it's like a farm town. I don't know. It's that nostalgic Americana, good old hometown ethos. And there are classic character story beats, like this sort of family-oriented narrative, we'll call it. I'm just trying not to talk about the movie at all. It is wholesome, and I think I actually, joking aside, watched the whole thing without actually falling asleep. As much as I wasn't excited by it, it is engaging in its unveiling of what's happening to this guy and learning about who Alan Straight actually was, because this is apparently a true story.
Alvin Straight, based on a true story. Boy, my feelings actually are complicated about this movie, to be honest. You're right in one thing about me vibing with the journey that Alvin goes on. That I really loved. Him actually out on the road, traveling by. Like, this is essentially a quarter, like, farm documentary. Like, I don't know. Like, there's the overhead shots and, like, the just framing of...
It's a lot of wheat.
The open highway and the clouds and stuff like that. Like, they really linger on those things. I found the first 15, maybe up to 20 minutes being like, uh-oh, I'm going to hate this movie. Uh-oh, I'm going to hate this movie.
Yep.
Because I was not vibing with it in the setup. Like, it really is just setting up the fact that this guy's old. His brother has had a stroke and he's going to go and visit him. And you could show that by just showing Richard Farnsworth trying to get onto the lawnmower. And that's all that I need to know. Be like, this guy's old. Like, I get it. He's old. I don't need 3 separate scenes to see how old he is before he goes on his journey.
When I did a little bit of background research, apparently when David Lynch first made Eraserhead, the script is like 25 pages long. And he made an 80-minute movie out of it. So I suspect that this was stretched out by process as much as it was written this way, like in hindsight, because I agree with you.
Most of the David Lynchness stuff is, I think, seeped out of this movie, save for a couple of scenes of like, this is David Lynch to a T. Specifically a scene with a deer that I'm like, oh yeah, this is very much a David Lynch movie. It is weird and odd. However, there are some very sweet and heartbreaking moments. There is specifically a scene with Richard Farnsworth talking to another old man in a bar about World War II. And I was like, I almost wish there was more of this and less of the other stuff. Having some more of those, like some of those journey scenes, but having more of these interactions with people along the way. That's what I was like vibing with the most. And then we'll talk about the ending here in a bit, but basically complicated. I think there's stuff here that's really strong and other stuff that I think could be completely eliminated and make this such a more succinct and I think better film overall.
That's how I feel about your life.
But let's get into some backstory here then. So The Straight Story was released on October 15th, 1999. It was released on the same day as Fight Club, which was written by Jim Alls, directed by David Fincher, starring Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, and Helena Bonham Carter. We have made an entire episode on Fight Club, so you can go back and listen to that if you'd like. I don't think this movie had a chance when Fight Club opens up opposite you.
Just like 1999, you can just quickly turn this off and just listen to a Fight Club episode, because that's what everybody did in 1999 anyways. Yeah.
That being said, it is fairly well reviewed. It is currently rated 8.0 on IMDb, 86 on Metacritic, and then on Rotten Tomatoes, from 103 critics, it's rated 95%. And based off of 31,467 users, which is actually pretty low for Rotten Tomatoes, it's at 91%.
Wow.
It is available on DVD, and that is it. There is no Blu-ray release from this movie, and it is on no streaming platform. So let's pause for a second to have this conversation. It is partly owned.
Controversy.
It is partly owned by Disney. Disney is like the first production studio that shows up, but it's not on Disney Plus. You cannot buy it even, rent it on any streaming platform whatsoever. Doing a bit of, I'll just say, surface level research. Did you see who the other production company was on this film?
No.
It is Studio Canal or Canal Plus over in France.
Right.
Which France, I will say, France loves David Lynch. Like, loves David Lynch.
They would.
Yeah, they would.
Right? They would.
And so he often gets part of his financing from, like, all over the world sort of thing. And from what I can understand, they own the international rights to it. And so I think Disney has just not allowed it to be on any other platform. I don't know, out of spite or something like that or what. But even though it's partly owned by Disney, it is not on Disney Plus. You can't get it anywhere. And if I could log in via a France VPN, I could check it out and see if it's somewhere over there. But yeah, you cannot find this movie very easily.
Disney probably just forgot that it exists.
Good.
Because they're just like, there's no singing, there's no princesses, and now there's no exploding superheroes. It just doesn't register.
I will put it to you, Dave, that on the Disney Plus platform is $1 Million Duck. So them forgetting about a movie that actually exists, I don't know if that actually explains it 100% or not. So its budget to make this film was $10 million, which is pretty low, I would say, for a Disney-produced film. It opened to $92,000. It did not do very well in its first opening weekend. Domestically, it would go on to make $6 million. Internationally, basically nothing but $213,000. So this total was $6 million or $10 million with inflation. So it did not even cover the budget to this movie. Got some awards recognition, but really this movie was not a huge hit at the time at the box office. Its plot description from IMDb is, an old man makes a long journey by lawnmower to mend his relationship with his ill brother. It stars Richard Farnsworth as Alvin, Sissy Spacek as Rose, and Harry Dean Stanton as Lyle. Anything you want to say about any of those actors, Dave?
Sure. I mean, before I get to the dark stuff, I just had this great thought from the plot description of him on that manual lawnmower.
Yeah.
With the blades and just like almost like a what do you call them? Scooter.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
rascal
am
scooter.
getting old. Well, I have a sad thing.
Okay.
So Richard Farnsworth has an Oscar, so he seems like a nice guy. Started off as stuntman.
Yep.
Just after he made this movie, he died in 2000.
Yeah.
In 2000, he killed himself.
Yeah.
Because he was dying of a very painful terminal cancer. So
I will say
that
you
sucks.
can. Yeah. The ending is not so nice. You could, if you see him at the Oscar ceremony in 2000, when he was nominated, you can kind of tell. Like, he looks kind of rough.
Can see it.
He started like years before this. Like, he has a credit on Gone with the Wind. Is how long Richard Farnsworth was around.
Old 1920. Yeah.
I will say that actually the most I know Richard Farnsworth from is Misery from 1990. He plays the sheriff in Misery, who's great. And then
he was apparently a chariot driver in Spartacus.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about old.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about Stanley Kubrick again. I find it really weird now is that seeing Sissy Spacek, I find it a little bit weird seeing her in this movie, knowing that now she would be in the Richard Farnsworth role. Like, it's just different ages and stuff going on right now. But I mean, considered one of our great actresses, right? So she has done some really solid work in the past. I try to think of where I know her the best from. To be honest, I haven't.
Probably Carrie.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Now that you say that. Yeah, obviously Carrie is going to be like the biggest one that people know her from. I remember seeing In the Bedroom, which I don't think anyone has talked about that movie since it came out in 2001. But she was nominated for Best Actress in that role. Definitely got an Oscar for Coal Miner's Daughter back in the 80s or 70s, whenever that movie came out. But I've never seen that movie, so I don't have any relationship with it at all.
Coal Miner's Daughter is 1980s, right in between. You're on your game. The only weird thing, she's cousins with Rip Torn, like first cousins.
That's weird. Okay.
Yeah, so apparently he's the one that got her into some school of acting.
By the way, Dave, by the way, it is actually pronounced Tornchek. So Rip Tornchek.
This one you might like. She actually auditioned for Princess Leia, and Carrie Fisher auditioned for Carrie.
Huh.
And they ended up getting the opposite roles.
I would say that the right person got the right role, to be perfectly frank.
Well, we will never know.
I guess so.
We'll never know.
Princess Leia does not have a southern twang, David. Okay.
She tried to start off as a singer.
Don't we all?
Didn't work out. And she's got a weird song hating on John Lennon and Yoko Ono. But
see, this is my thing. Going back to my pet theory that every actor actually wanted to be a singer and every singer wanted to be an actor.
You know, we for the CTV app on the Apple TV, we've been watching The Masked
Let me
Singer.
just sit down here because I need to buckle in for this little anecdote that you're about to tell me. Yes, your CTV app.
I'm just saying, there's this show called The Masked Singer, which is awful. But we watch it, and you get that sense that whomever is performing, you have to be kind of trying to be a triple threat to make it in that industry. Mm-hmm. You can't be one-dimensional anymore. They don't like the Clooney's. You got to be able to fight now. You got to do backflips. That's it. And there was another thing that said she's related to King Edward I, but who cares? Not our
who
king.
Isn't? And then Harry Dean Stanton has been in basically every movie ever made for like 40-something years before he passed away a few years ago.
The only weird thing that popped up, which I thought was fascinating. Apparently Roger Ebert, your hero, loves Harry Dean Stanton. He's got a rule that if Harry Dean Stanton and somebody are in a film, that it's an automatically good movie, which is a weird thing for a critic to say. Bias.
A little bit biased.
Apparently, he and his family were once tied up and pistol whipped in a home robbery.
Oh, God. He looks like...
that came up.
He does look like generic old man, but he's good. He is good in everything that he's in. I can't say it automatically makes it a good movie, but he's definitely good in everything that I've ever seen him in. Even if he's in like literally one scene in The Avengers, just randomly shows up in The Avengers.
Is he? So it said he's an alien. Is he the guy the alien rips out of the stomach of?
No. Oh, an alien. Yes.
He is, right? Yeah. Okay.
Kind of adding to the weirdness of a David Lynch project here. This was written by John Roach and Mary Sweeney. I think every single other movie project, David Lynch has actually written the script that he's directed. But in this one instance, he did not. So this is John Roach's only writing credit. He never wrote anything before or after this. And this was Mary Sweeney's first writing credit. She'd go on to write a couple of other films and an episode of the TV show The Romanoffs. She was also married to David Lynch for a year. I will point that out. But she's more...
Well, apparently she was his editor.
I was going to say, because...
Their whole career.
Yeah, her whole career, she was editor, producer, worked on David Lynch's other projects like Twin Peaks, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive. And they married, I think, in 2001 and divorced in 2001. But anyways, I think they still work together.
Like 2 months.
They still work together.
Yeah.
Directed, of course, by David Lynch. He started with short films, but came to prominence by writing and directing Eraserhead and then The Elephant Man. That film, he'd receive an Oscar nomination for Best Director and Best Adapted Screenplay. This would be actually a tradition for him being nominated for Best Director, but his movie not being nominated for Best Picture. He took that success to make Doom, Blue Velvet, which would earn him his second Oscar nomination for directing. And then other films he made are Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me, and Lost Highway. And then his next project after this was Mulholland Drive, which would bring him his last major film success. He'd be nominated for his third Best Director Oscar. And then he'd direct one more film in 2006 called Inland Empire. And since that time, he's written and directed a bunch of short films, like just a crap load of them, plus 18 episodes of The Return of Twin Peaks in 2017. But otherwise, since 2006, he has not directed a feature film. So I don't know what's going on with him. Maybe he just got fed up with Hollywood and decided to walk away.
Well, it turns out he's a painter.
Just like George W. Bush.
Originally trained as a painter. And I've seen some of his paintings, and they're dark. And he's described his paintings as organic, violent comedies. So that basically tells you everything you need to know about David Lynch. Yeah. So the quick thing is, apparently George Lucas asked him to direct Return of the Jedi, which I think is hilarious.
That would have been wild, yes.
Even weirder, he was offered Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Really?
And he turned that down because he's like, why would I direct this movie?
No, he does not fit that. I could see a David Lynch Star Wars movie. I think that would actually kind of work.
Yeah.
I do not.
Well, we got one. Dude.
I guess that's true. Yeah. I do not see him directing a teen comedy. That just does not fit with his aesthetic at all.
Although he did make The Straight Story, so I mean, what do we really know?
Which is,
and then the only thing,
just R-rated hijinks after R-rated hijinks is The Straight Story.
Just nonstop sex and drugs with old people.
We need to make that movie.
I do like this one thing I learned is that he says he's a big Bourne movie fan, but he thinks the first one is the best. So I think that's in your face, Paul Greengrass, you hack. I don't know. He's got a pretty obviously weird life. There's a little tidbit that kind of like Fresh Prince. He got his first wife and him bought a house for like nothing, but in the worst neighborhood in Philly. And they were raising their daughter, and there was gun violence, and they got robbed and stolen cars and dead people and all this kind of stuff. And then they made the move to LA where he got his big break. So, I just thought a little Fresh Prince, mythology there. It has nothing to do with that show. So, that's about it.
I guess moving on to like spoilers here now. Like, where do you want to start with this movie, Dave? Like, what worked for you? What didn't work for you?
It's how the whole movie reflects that you're not really given a lot of grounding. So, for example, never mind the way she speaks, there are those moments she's looking out with melancholy at that weird I mean, that's a Lynch thing. This weird thing with a sprinkler and a ball and a kid that comes out and then standing. You can see his work as a photographer. I mean, those are sort of photographs, but that little montage was it felt like 10 minutes. And you don't understand, like I didn't understand what was going on until, 30 minutes later, he's telling the story. Is it to the hitchhiker that he recounts the story of how she lost her kids? And, this kind of, non-linear, this is a very linear film, but it's told in a non-linear way. Sure. So you kind of have to get a ground of what's going on in reflection. Even the opening sequence was so weird with the lady. I've never understood the foil sun tanning, outdoors. That's such an American picture. I don't really understand why people do that, especially white people who apparently burn easier, but they put a big foil sheet. That's a thing that is very Americana, but that whole opening sequence, like you, I was sitting like, what am I watching? Why do I have to finish this? If I was at a theater, I might have walked out already and asked for my $5 back.
You haven't been to a theater recently if you think a movie costs $5.
I'm just saying, it was $19.99.
Oh, okay.
This movie's not coming back for another run. And I would have immediately gone next door and watched Fight Club again. So I think working through it, though, I think you're absolutely right. Like the moment he starts meeting people on the journey, like I didn't really vibe with there was a couple of chuckles because, everybody likes to laugh at old men, but that small town, empty Main Street thing, I don't care. But once he's on the road, even before the hitchhiker scene, the fact that he breaks the first tractor or lawnmower, I was suddenly like, you know what? This movie's got it's got something. Yeah. It's not just going to be him putting around. He fucked it up, but he still wants to go. So I was like, there's a little bit of, not an odyssey, but there's this feeling that this is going to be a real, maybe an odyssey. There's going to be a story in this. And then all of the actual interactions with the people he meets on the road are great, actually. I think that's where the writing in the movie has real meat. Yeah. And I, too, thought the veteran-to-veteran storytelling was like the mea culpa, the best part of the film. That revelation of the kill shot, and the emotion. I mean, I guess that's why he was nominated for an Oscar, but that scene with the two old men, it just felt very real sitting in this bar. By the end, I don't know. Like I said, I didn't leave. I wasn't bored. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, it's almost harder to talk about movies where you think it's like, it's okay. It's not great or awful. You're just trying to pull things out and, I don't know, trying to wrestle with them a little bit more. I do want to, lean in a little bit with that veteran scene, because I think that is the crux of this movie. The rain cloud or the thing that's overhead the entire time is him eventually meeting his brother. We know through dialogue that there was an argument of some kind, that there was a breakdown in that relationship for like the last decade, and it's never explicitly said. Now, you said that you think that it was the brother who caused the fire?
No, I think he did.
Okay.
The reason why I got that, I mean, just quickly, not to move away from your suggestion of conversation topic, but since you brought up quickly, for those, nobody who's listening to this is going to be able to watch this movie. So on the first leg of his second journey, let's call it, his actual journey on the road, he passes by a hitchhiker, and when they're sitting together, it's a young woman who's running away from her family. So he recounts the tale of his daughter, Sissy Spacek's character, and we understand a little bit why we finally understand why she's staring out of the window and staring at these kids and crying all the time. So it turns out that she is mentally disabled. She had kids. She went out. They were with some caregiver. The house went on fire. I can't remember if they said they all survived and one was badly burnt, or they all died and one survived.
No. So I think one got badly burnt, but they all got put into foster care. That's what they say.
And then they were put into foster care because she was deemed unable to care for them. And so that's quite a jar. And it's used so well to kind of, what I loved about that part is he's not telling this young woman to go home. He's just giving her his experience of this deep regret and these familial connections that she cries every day, missing her kids, and like life is not fair. And so this woman gets this life lesson. But later when he meets those folks who fix the tractor, he refuses to go into that house. Mm-hmm. And even to the point where the guy's like, the phone's right in the kitchen and he won't enter the house. I just felt like there was a weird tension there because, why does it matter so much that they point at that at least 3 times in that conversation. I think that nice homeowner asks him inside like so many times, but he'd rather sit in that dirt heap trailer he constructed for himself. And I just got this moment where I was just thinking, I think he was involved. And I think that there's deep found regret in everything that's revealed in his life. It feels like his entire life has been these tragic errors. And so it leads to your kind of wanting to spend time with the veterans. Even there, as the story unwinds itself, which is a fantastic script portion, like it's the conversation so well written and believable. When he finally recounts his World War experience, I mean, it's pretty gripping. It's some gripping stuff.
Yeah, it's like, I guess you don't really realize what you have until it's gone, right?
Paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Am I right?
I think the tragedy of life in many ways is that when you're growing up, you think like the stories of your parents or even your grandparents have nothing to do with you and you're not as interested. And then you get older and want to hear those stories, and either they're too old to remember, or they can't remember, or they passed away and they can't tell you about it anymore. And there's a bit of a tragedy I've always found with that. Like the moment I really wanted to know more about my grandmother, she was unable to tell me more about her life.
Is it in this movie, or it's just a general adage, right? Youth is wasted on the young. Yeah. I think he's got a different line actually about being old. They ask him, right? Those the frat boys. Oh, I can't remember what he's saying.
Oh, no, I can't remember. I didn't write it down, but
all right, we'll look it up. Anyway, so keep going.
Well, I was going to say too, it's that it's interesting that we've watched this movie right after we saw Magnolia, where Magnolia is really concerned with the relationship between fathers and sons. Well, at least fathers and children in that film. I actually find this film is much more the relationship between siblings is what keeps kind of coming up again and again. He's, of course, going to see his brother. I mean, they call them brothers, the people that they went and fought with. I think that idea of brotherhood is actually this recurring theme that keeps popping up. Even the young girl who's running away, there is that tension about the secret that she doesn't really, well, she's pregnant is part of the reason why she's running away. But there's an unsaid thing about why that would be such a big deal to reveal to the family. We can fill in the blanks, of course, but I think that there is, again, this idea of family. What is family? Where do you find that family? And really that outpouring of kindness that he sees throughout his journey. He is this doddering old man. And I think there's this idea in present time, 2020, that he would have been robbed 5 miles into his journey and left for dead on the side of the road. And yet he makes this like 2-state journey because of the kindness of strangers. Like he is helped along 2 or 3 times because of people that have allowed their kindness to shine through. Specifically about that scene that I love, though, is there's that revealing. I think that so often we look at that generation who is essentially almost all died out now, like the World War II veterans that, played everything close to their chest. They didn't show emotion. And I feel like this actually might be a window into the world of going into a Legion or going into an old dive bar in those little small towns where real truths were unearthed, but only amongst each other. They would not say this to their family. They would not say this to someone else that hadn't already had a part of that life experience at the same time.
Yeah, I think just again, because nobody can watch this movie, the big reveal, if we're going to spoil that much, is the friend he makes talks about how difficult it was to be a soldier. And Alvin's straight story was that story, plus he was a great sniper, apparently inadvertently had killed one of his own men in an ambush. And I think I watched this video a few months ago, and it was a British World War II vet meeting a young veteran from Afghanistan. And it was, I think, around mental illness, but kind of as you brought up, this sort of PTSD-inducing army culture where you just put up or shut up.
Right.
And shut up. But it was a similar feel when this old man, even though they're fundamentally different wars, the experience at its core is the same. And they're both weeping, and they've both been shot. They've both lived in fear. And, to your earlier point, trying to compare it to Magnolia, I think I agree. The familial themes are important, but I think this movie is told with a sense of grace because it's not... Magnolia is like this finger-pointing, angsty highlight of relationships. Yeah. It's like, the father's shit, the son's shit, everybody's shit, fuck everybody. This movie is more about a man coming to terms with the mistakes, not even mistakes, but the decisions and the life that he's led through the way he speaks to everyone he meets, and that sense of vulnerability and that sense of like just putting it out for us, but in this narrative, for other people to see him as he is in his last days of his life is why I could keep watching this movie. I thought it had a great soul. His quote, I just Googled it, when the kid asked him, what's the... I don't remember what he said when he was the best part of being old, but he asked him what the worst part of being old is, and he said the worst part of being old is remembering that I was young.
Right.
And even that is like, it's not that Hollywood, right? It's not this thing where he's like talking about how he's in his golden age. There's a lot of remorse, but it's done without a lot of that violence and anger. It's just he's driving through it. He's riding it out on his mower.
Well, I think that there is, in a way, like the more I thought about it, I feel like his journey, at least in the film, again, don't know about like the real life story necessarily, but at least in the film, it feels like him being on this mower, going to his brother, is a sort of penance that he's giving to himself, because he could go by bus. He could have someone drive him over there. There's other ways to get to his brother if he really wanted to. And he's decided, nope, I got to do it this way. And this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it over whatever it is, 2.5 months of driving by lawnmower.
It's like...
And I actually like the other quote that he has, which is like, you can tell a lot about a person who calls them wieners. And I think it's 100% true instead of hot dogs. But I mean, there's eventually, and it only like it's the very end of the film where he meets Harry Dean Stanton. He comes to his brother's house eventually.
Just so you know, Harry Dean Stanton is my brother too.
And it's only like a 5-minute scene before the credits are starting to go. Like it really is them seeing each other, sitting down, and there's about to be a conversation with them. I don't know. How did you take that scene?
I mean, it's bipolar, right? There's an element where it feels anticlimactic, and then there's an element where it has a beauty in it because it doesn't matter what they say. There's a lot of emotion that's portrayed, and the fact that they sit together on the porch. It's so old American, but they sit together on the porch. I mean, that in itself is a visual representation of a peace being brokered. I don't think that adding dialogue would have added anything. It might have belabored a point, if they're just like, oh, I forgive you, man. Or like, remember when I think it might have been
which is
too much.
Weirdly is what I was kind of expecting in the back of my mind, because again, I saw Disney being the first company in this film. I honestly thought
Disney likes to hit your head over.
Right. I honestly thought that is actually how this movie was going to end. And they don't give it to you that way. It's more like, this is the very beginning of this relationship being mended for who knows how long before one of them passes away. Like, this is very much the end of their relationship together. It hit me very...
This is probably why Disney has disowned this movie.
Maybe.
They're like, well, you didn't say it. You didn't say it. We don't want to watch it. And yet we're not leaving anything to our viewers.
They're still streaming the computer wore tennis shoes. It hit me a lot more because there is actually something similar that's happened in my immediate family. So my dad has a brother. I have an uncle, Oliver, who I have never met in my entire life. I know I have cousins who I have also never met in my entire life. I only know bits and pieces because he doesn't like to talk about it all that much. All I know is that there was some disagreement that they had earlier in their life that has kind of caused them not to talk to each other at all anymore, which is unfortunate. but I don't try and push that. However, there was a moment here a few years ago where apparently my uncle had a stroke, who was in the hospital, and my dad was like, I need you to go and take me to the hospital. I need to go and talk to him. And so we took him to the hospital. He went and visited. It was just him who went into the room. Again, have never seen this man in my entire life. And it was a very short conversation, apparently, but I could tell how much that affected my dad right after. He's very quiet, and he's not a very quiet person for like the rest of the day. So I take a look at this, and I really do feel like siblings have just a very different energy and a very different relationship, even if you don't talk to each other. Because like, hey, we grew up, we went through some things together. There's almost that going to war kind of mentality, whereas like, hey, we all kind of survived this thing together. That's often unsaid. So even if you have those breakdowns in your relationship, you can kind of pick it up again if need be. I guess why I'm using that anecdote is that it was so bittersweet to me to see these old guys try and talk to each other, but knowing that there's still two old guys who have their own egos and stuff together. And I think they're, at least the Richard Farnsworth character is trying to show grace. And I guess it's up to our imagination to know if the Harry Dean Stanton is going to be receptive to it, because we don't really know specifics in their relationship at all.
I mean, I do like that they do show when they sit that the brother is moved. Mm-hmm. It's not like he's not like this cartoon character and shuts the door in his face or something. Like they have this look, and they sit, and even as they fade out, I don't understand the star stuff, but that might be a Dave Lynch thing.
Yeah.
Of course, a Capricorn would say that.
It reminds me, I don't know if we've brought up on this podcast, but when we did that podcast brunch club that we do together with that trauma expert,
right?
And he brought up how even with siblings, they have different parents and different experiences, because the way they receive data and the way that, let's say, your parents treat you is fundamentally different, even if they're trying to do the same thing.
Sorry, just to fill people in, who are listening to this, I host something called Podcast Brunch Club, which is a worldwide organization that give you certain podcast episodes to listen to each month. And yes, one month we were listening to, I think it was trauma in general, wasn't it? Was the topic?
I think it might have been addiction.
Oh, sorry,
it might be trauma.
It was addiction. Was the topic, and one of them was this trauma expert talking about their expertise.
Right, and I'll just quickly say the host of that podcast is an idiot. But I thought it was fascinating, and to your point, it's not restricted to families, but I think families bear this burden the heaviest because the weight, the sort of relationship connections that you have with, this old school blood relatives has a lot more implied responsibility, whether people can live up to it or not, or whether they like it or not, or whatever actually happens in the world, whether it's even supposed to be that way, I don't know. There's something about being in a family group that culturally puts a lot more burden on you, and if that breaks, that fracture can be so much deeper. My mom's got stories about her extended family back in Korea that are like that, relationships that were broken. And Helen's told me some stuff about her family in town. This is not a rare thing. And I've met a lot of people that don't get along, either directly or have, like you said, their parents or their cousins or somebody, where they point in different directions, whatever their beliefs are. But they carry that. I mean, I know I do. When I didn't get along with my family, it was all my own craziness, but it's not like I didn't think about it every day. It colors everything you do. So I think that's one of the powerful points of this movie and the Disney aspect is that it follows a man. I think you have brought a great thing, and maybe this is why I thought of the Odyssey at the beginning. This is a trial he sets for himself for atonement, because you're right. Throughout the movie, he's offered, it's not even just at the beginning. Through every stage, he's offered an easy way out, some kind of reprieve. And I don't even know if it's stubbornness. I think it's self-awareness that it's not enough for him to just pop up at a door and just say, yeah, I heard you're dying. He needs to show his brother or himself that this is worth the trip. And it's, of course, dovetailed at the end with the sit down with the priest or whatever, pastor. I can't remember what denomination is in the graveyard. And that's a great spiritual talk too, about this sort of thing, about penance and about coming to terms with one's life. So, those are the strongest parts of this narrative. And that's the part that kept me in is, I
know like we've just watched this movie, and it wasn't like almost a week ago that I watched it.
Right.
I think it was with the priest in the graveyard too, where they have a conversation, and one of them says, there's a lot of men just trying to forget. And I don't know, that quote just stood out to me because I think that's true. I think that's our go-to. We're just trying to forget the past. We're trying to forget the things that make us more self-aware about the pain that we've caused other people. We tend to just like try and brush that away. But I think this movie, what it's trying to do is, even at that advanced age, really grappling with that and being like, no, I can still make amends. I can still seek not forgiveness, but seek grace and show grace no matter what age I happen to be. It's not enough just to forget. You also have to work through that.
We were just watching Lord of the Rings and
extended cut or just regular cut?
Movie. It's on Netflix. This is how I know I've evolved. I watched the regular cut, Kyle, and I didn't watch it in single
like
sittings. I'm grown up. I'm mature now. And I didn't get upset of the plot changes. But there's that scene, I don't remember the exact breakdown, but Frodo's regretting they're in the caves of Moria. And he's like lamenting how he has this burden and they wish they had started earlier, etc. And Gandalf has that line, right? It doesn't matter where you've been. All that matters is what you do at the time you're given, something along those lines. And I've been also connected to this phrase, or this concept of good conscience, which is to me right now, this guy, Alvin Strait, for whatever, it sounds like he's made terrible mistakes. He talks about being a violent alcoholic. He talks about these brutal, traumatic life experiences. But finally, in this moment, he's like, I'm going to drive this lawnmower. I'm going to do the right thing. And in the end, I feel like he doesn't have to regret any of those stories. It becomes cathartic. I mean, being able to tell a guy in a bar that he killed his friend by accident, it's probably something obviously he's never told anyone before. You got to let that go, right? And it's not like they show a scene after where he's like, why did I tell this guy? I'm going to,
right.
You get this feeling like this is good.
Should I tell you about the time I killed a man?
All this to be said, I mean, I pull a lot of great value from the themes of the movie. It's not built well. The movie itself, there's a reason why it doesn't exist on streaming.
What I actually thought was
pretty boring.
Well, yeah, boring is a word. I would say, if I was being nice, I would say deliberate. But I agree with that. I also think, and this is a David Lynch thing, where it almost feels like it's shot to be shown on television. There's literally like fades to black, and then like I see when I'm watching TV episodes on Netflix. It is structured kind of weirdly and edited kind of weirdly. But again, that is David Lynch and how he wants his stuff to be seen.
I thought it was a 1999 thing, but you're right. And it brings me quick to this trivia point that apparently Mulholland Drive was originally pitched as a television show.
It was a TV movie, and then he made a feature film out of it. So there actually exists the TV movie version and then the feature film version that has different people in it. So
interesting. Weird. So yeah, to your point, that now that you brought it up, that's how I remember it. It feels like a made-for-TV movie, except that it's slow. I mean, it's only an hour and a half or hour 40 minutes, but it felt...
It's under 2 hours, yeah.
Oh, is it? Yeah, because it felt like a bit of a grind. Yeah, it keeps you in though. I mean, if you're into the story, it'll keep you in there because it's not poorly written. It's just... It could have been done in probably 60 minutes. It could have been a television show.
We're done here.
The machinist told us that we do need to wrap up. So let's ask the questions that we often ask on this show. Do you think this holds up? And do you think this is culturally relevant still?
No. Culturally relevant only in the themes that we talk about. I think the philosophies, I
think there's scenes that I think could hold their own. Like if you made like a short film out of just them talking at the bar.
Yes.
It would be great. It'd be phenomenal.
But not as a movie. We forgot quickly to bag on this weird... There's a moment where he apparently witnesses a car accident and this hysterical woman's talking about hitting a deer every day on the same stretch of highway.
You didn't like that dramatic zoom into his face? That was like weird. Straight up like a 70s cheesy action film. Yeah.
So random. And it didn't play at all in any other part of the movie. She didn't come back. The theme of hitting a deer off. I mean, maybe that's a metaphor of his life, but it doesn't matter. It's okay. Anyways,
it just is like this goofy. It just feels like this goofy excuse to have like a weird scene in them.
Yeah.
Like part of this movie is structured kind of like film noir. Like it is not shot in that style, but in that you're going to see these interesting characters and there's like individual scenes building up to the very end. Or have you ever seen like the really bizarre Scorsese movie called After Hours?
No.
So it's in 1985. It's, I think, his only technical comedy that he's ever directed. And it's like this guy's one night in New York City where like literally everything goes wrong and like everyone is acting at an 11. And everything is so bizarre. For that one scene, basically think of that deer scene, but as an entire movie. And that's what After Hours feels like to me. But that it didn't fit the tone of the rest of the movie. So it was like, what is happening? Why is this happening in this movie right now?
You know, I just had this thought. This movie kind of reminds me of a more recent movie called Nebraska with, is it Brewster?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a different movie, but just this slow-moving Americana about an old man sort of reviewing his life. I think that movie's a lot more...
I think Nebraska is stronger in its themes.
It's a lot better movie than this. But so, yeah, I don't think it holds up.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, like taking pieces out, I mean, it's not the movie that holds up. Those are just universal narrative concepts that are great. Yeah.
So that's what Dave and I thought. But what do you think? You can send feedback to kyleanddavevsthemachine at gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter or Instagram with the handle KDVSTM. And if you want to see the entire list of films we've watched and the ratings we've given, you can go to our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. And if you want to support us monetarily so that we can continue doing this podcast and not usher in the apocalypse, you can go to our Patreon page. There's a link in the show notes of this episode. You can support for as low as $1 a month. Of course, we do not want you to donate if it in any way causes you financial hardship. Something that you can do for absolutely free is to leave a rating and review on whatever app you use for podcasts. But let's get to the rating of this movie. Dave, what would you rate this movie out of 5?
I'm going to lowball it. I'm thinking like a 2.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we're drawing a lot that I like, but I don't think I'd ever want to watch this movie again. And I think that these themes that are well represented are done better elsewhere. So, and even what's his name, Farnsworth.
Richard Farnsworth.
Is that an Oscar-winning performance? I mean, the first hour until he hits the bar, I didn't even think he was acting. I don't know.
He just was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I felt a little underwhelmed by the actual movie itself.
I will say this. I really wrestled with how I wanted to rate this. I will say most of this movie, I was thinking 3, 3, 3, 3. I'm going to give this movie a 3 probably. I honestly, I'm giving it a half a star more just for the couple of scenes that I thought were like super, super stellar. So I'm rating this film, I wouldn't say relatively higher than you, but it's kind of my like, honestly, this is like my go-to rating if it's like, it was okay. So I'm giving it 3.5 is what I'm giving this movie.
How is a 70% okay? I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of percentage point.
I'm going letter grade because that would basically make this a B- in my university classes. So it's not like it's an amazing piece of work.
I feel like
I'm just saying.
I feel like a Darth Sidious, and I'm slowly corrupting you. And at some point, you're going to join me, where we're going to cynically give everything. Everything's going to start at a 0 and have to earn their way up to a 4 or 5.
Here's your tip, and I'm going to take $1 away every time you do something wrong. Well, Dave, that means that it does average out to 2.75, which unfortunately makes it tie with 7 other films.
I'm ready.
So I'll go from top to bottom. Tarzan, Notting Hill, South Park, Sleepy Hollow, Mystery Men, She's All That, and Ravenous. So how would you fit that into those?
I was thinking below until we got to She's All That. I think I would put it above She's All That. What was above She's All That?
Yes, I would agree with that. Mystery Men.
Oh, man. I remember liking that movie more until we rewatched it, right? Like,
right. I agree with that. Yeah.
I held that movie in quite high esteem. And then after that's your favorite, right? South Park?
No, it's Sleepy Hollow. It's right above Mystery Men.
I might put it between Sleepy Hollow and Mystery Men. I don't know.
My favorite threesome.
Well, then we won't have to fight very much because that's what I was going to actually say, is I think it should go between those two.
Yeah.
I think Sleepy Hollow is a better film. I would rewatch that movie over this one if I was given the option.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that means that The Straight Story is entering our list at the number 32 position. Boy, we've seen a lot of films, haven't we, Dave?
Oh, it's getting crazy. Not to mention all the other movies we're watching on the side. Like I finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy last week.
Right. And not that we're going to be watching Citizen Kane together at some point in the next couple of weeks. Let's find out what we're watching next week. Let me push this button. Oh, actually, this is super exciting, Dave. Next week, we're going to be talking about Man on the Moon. This is one of my, actually on a list that I am actually ashamed to have never seen. Because I honestly think this is going to be like very much my jam. And I'm going to like it a whole lot. Mostly because it includes Jim Carrey, who I happen to like. It's talking about Andy Kaufman, who I love his story. It's directed by Milos Forman, who I'm a big fan of his direction. And it's probably going to be, at least part of that story is going to be about professional wrestling, which means I get to bore you with my wrestling knowledge, which
Spoiler
I'm
alert.
sure you
Jeez.
are so happy about. You're going to be so happy about.
Some wrestling, as it's the correct
Have you
term.
seen Man on the Moon?
Yes, I watched it, I think with Helen, although I think she's going to disavow that probably in the mid-2000s, but not when it came out in theaters. And
right.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure technical term is wrestling with an apostrophe.
If you have time, anyone who's listening, and you like to watch them, if you'd like to watch the movies along with us, watch Man on the Moon, and then immediately after, or at least the next day, watch the documentary Jim and Andy that is on Netflix, because it makes a really great double feature that you should watch. By the way, we're getting close to Christmas here, Dave, but because it's December.
The Yuletide.
It is December.
Yep.
So really, I don't know why you brought this lawnmower over in the first place. What kind of grass are you cutting out there?
But the reality is I'm just towing my toilet so that I can dump the septic here. Yeah, I didn't have anywhere else to put it. That's what's in the back.
I always knew you were full of crap, Dave.
I am so turned on right now.